The opinions expressed on this program represent the viewpoints of individual authors or contributors and do not necessarily reflect those of Troy University.
Hello and welcome to eConversations. I'm Dr. Alan Mendenhall, Associate Dean and Grady Rosier Professor in the Sorrell College of Business at Troy University. I am guest hosting eConversations today in place of the regular host, Dr. Dan Sutter. Every 4 years, the United States elects a new president. When a new president is elected, a remarkable transition occurs with the top administrative positions in government getting turned over to new people. The voluntary transfer of power from one party to another is a remarkable feature of democracy, one we should never take for granted. The transition to a new administration is itself a remarkable accomplishment in organizational management. Executing this transition is important for the continuing function of the federal government and to help the new president advance his political agenda. What are the challenges and frustrations of a presidential transition? Today on eConversations, we are joined by someone with personal experience in this process. Donaldson Talley is a lawyer and currently a partner at Luther Strange and Associates. She served in the White House as Deputy Assistant and Deputy Counsel to the President of the United States. She graduated from the University of Alabama and earned her law degree from Harvard Law School. Welcome to Troy, Annie, and to eConversations.
Thanks.
Well, Annie, I want to begin by just asking you about your role in the transition with the previous administration.
Sure. Well, in 2016, when Donald Trump won the presidency, I was on the transition team. I served as one of the counsels to the transition itself, the organizational body called the transition, and then also worked to set up the White House counsel's office on day one and inauguration day and thereafter. So I ended up serving as Chief of Staff to the White House Counsel and then later as Deputy Counsel to the President in the White House.
And what was your experience like with the transition? What were the things you did on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, transition is an amazing thing. As you know, the President and his team, the President-elect and his team, have been campaigning out across the country for the last year or two. And then suddenly, when he or she wins, there's this new challenge, and it's to govern. It's not to campaign anymore. It's to set up a new government. So the transition comes in. It's a bunch of people. I mean, the number of people that scale up from day one of transition is just amazing. And that team gets briefings on what's going on. They study policy and develop policy for the first 100 days and thereafter. They staff up the entire federal government. And then, they also are running this massive organization that's getting ready for Inauguration Day and to hit the ground running as the new leadership of the nation.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff. And I know we've just had an election. As we sit here today, we're roughly a month after that election. And President-elect Biden is having to go through this process now with his transition team. And so we're hearing a lot of stuff in the media about choices and about complications and about things that the transition team is doing. What are some things that happen that maybe we're not hearing about on the media?
Sure. Well, the media is focused a lot on who's getting what position. It's kind of a soap opera. XYZ gets this, and the Attorney General position's open, and who's going to be that person? And they focus on that in the same way as they focus on the campaign as a horse race, rather than as who's going to lead the country next. So there's a lot of drama in that, and a lot of drama in the media. But some of the things that the media doesn't cover is, the transition has been going on. Each side has a transition from basically the time that they're the nominee for their party. So it's not something that starts on election day or a few days before or after. So there's been a team in place for President-elect Biden for quite some time who has been working on finding these people to lead the country, to lead these agencies, working on what their policy agenda is going to be. So while Joe Biden was out being Joe Biden candidate for president, he had a team that was working on this the whole time.
And I imagine just little things like getting a new email address and getting a new office.
There are so many things, and it's when you've been on transition, you're obviously focused on what's happening on January 20th and thereafter, but you've also got a massive, quickly growing organization where, you may have had 40 or 50 people who were focused on transition on a day-to-day basis the day before Election Day, and then suddenly the day after Election Day, everybody involved just kind of descends upon the transition organization, and you've got to deal with onboarding people, getting them ready to apply for jobs, getting them background checks, getting them access to information. So yeah, there are a lot of logistical challenges as well, and it doesn't matter what the situation is between presidencies and administrations. There's always those challenges.
And I imagine just walking into the White House has got to be an awesome experience. And this wasn't your first time walking into the White House, correct? You have been in there before.
That's right. Obviously, walking into the White House, even as a tourist, is just an amazing feeling. I had the privilege of being an intern for President Bush back in his first term. And so I had the awe-inspiring experience of first just being let into the gates. When you hand the Secret Service your ID and they say, okay, come on in. And you're thinking, wow, this is really amazing. They just let me walk into this place. So walking in, I was a big fan of West Wing as a young adult and a high schooler. So you have all these grandiose ideas of the White House, and I will say, when you walk in and you walk through the residence or down the colonnade or through the halls of the West Wing, whatever you have experienced and whatever your anticipation is nothing compared to actually hearing your footsteps go down the colonnade.
Wow.
It's just an awe-inspiring building, and it should be that way. We had a saying that if you don't get a little tingly feeling when you walk into work every day and when you walk through the gates of the White House, it's time to leave. Because if you don't feel like that, if you don't feel like you're serving your nation when you walk in, it's time to leave. But I will say, even as an intern, it was great. You're supervised a lot. You don't really have any autonomy there. Walking in the second time was just, again, even though I kind of knew what I was in for, I had no idea what I was in for. Basically, on the first day, while the inauguration ceremony was happening over on the Capitol, we were in the transition headquarters, which is a few blocks away. The whole city is shut down, as you can imagine, for Inauguration Day. All the roads are closed and everything like that. And I had the privilege of being one of the first people on President Trump's staff to be able to walk into the White House. So we get into a van from the transition headquarters. We keep getting waved through closed roads. We've got a military driver, driving us through all these gates. Gates keep opening for us, and again, that's an awe-inspiring experience. Like, they're just letting me in this place. And then, the driver had the inauguration ceremony on the radio. So, we were 10 or 15 staff driving over. We were hearing the president take his oath. And what you may or may not know is they broadcast the audio down Pennsylvania Avenue on these huge loudspeakers. So as we pulled into the West Wing, the military aide opens the door, says, "Welcome to the West Wing," right as the president is taking his oath of office. And you can hear it echoing down the streets of Washington. And it's just an indescribable feeling to walk in. And then, the interesting thing, again, turning back to transitions, the building is empty. The previous administration staff has gone. They've taken all their stuff with them. They show me to my office, which is just kind of an office with nothing in it. There's no computer, no books, no pens, no nothing. So again, it's an amazing thing. I think you said this earlier, but it's an amazing thing that we do in this country, that we just hand off power from one to another on January 20th, and 44 going on 45 times. It's just, everything's okay. We just keep moving and keep moving forward as a country. And that's a thing to celebrate.
It is. It's amazing, and it's a testimony to our resilience as a country, I think. Very, very few people know what you know and have experienced what you've experienced about this process. You could probably count on a hand, the number of people who could tell you with such detail what it's like to walk into an empty White House and having to put those books on the shelves and decorate that office for the first time. It truly is amazing. So, what is your biggest takeaway from that experience when you look back on that period? What are the things you think about?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that gets lost in the soap opera of who's going to be Secretary of this or Attorney General of that, and it is something that I think we should celebrate more as a country. You know, when people think about the peaceful transition of power, they think, okay, well, there's an election and one guy says, okay, the other guy is the next president, and that's what they think about. Just the logistics of turning over a government. If you think about it, there are 4,000
Wow.
Political positions. So there are 4,000 people that on January 20th lose their jobs, and then 4,000 new people come in. And of those, 1,000 have to go through Senate confirmation. And as you know, that's not an easy process in itself. So, you know, the big thing to think about, and that I just sit here now watching this transition and reflect on, is how monumental of an undertaking it is to do that, and how it's just amazing that everything keeps working. So yeah, it's a monumental undertaking, and you know, just the little details of how you're going to slot this in, and who's going to get this briefing, and you know, who's got their FBI background check done, and you know, the little things add up to such big things, and it is amazing.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the mechanics of it,
Sure.
just the procedures
Sure.
and some of the technicalities and the minutia. What are some of those things?
Sure. Well, you know, if you look back over our history, in 1940, let's just say, there were about 500,000 total federal government employees, about 600,000. Now there are over 2 million. And so the federal government is just a huge, huge body. And so what you have to think about from top to bottom is how you want to set that up. And obviously the White House is one small but very, very important part of that. So at the White House, you've got almost 100% turnover. There's obviously national security staff and other people that stay on. So you've got a White House staff where you walk in on the first day and somebody's just trying to find their desk and to figure out how to log on to their computer, of course. And those people are in charge of making sure the rest of the government and the bureaucracy is working. Now, obviously at the agencies, it's kind of the opposite of that. The top staff at the agencies, the secretaries and undersecretaries and you know, heads of offices are the ones that are turning over. So the rank and file folks are still making sure things are getting done. So checks are getting cut, regulations are being enforced, all of that sort of thing. So that kind of keeps moving no matter what. But you know, there are teams of people. So basically when you walk into the transition, you've got to organize all of this. So how we did it and how most most administrations do this is that they go by agencies. So they've got Health and Human Services, and they got VA, and they've got Ag and things like that. And there's a team of policy experts and folks that know the president-elect's agenda that go and they get briefings on how the current administration is doing. They get briefings. You probably heard a lot about the coronavirus briefings that they're getting. So those things are happening not just on the topics of the day that everybody's concerned about, but on things big and small. And so those teams get briefed. They start building a team to walk in on day one, and folks that can come and start doing those jobs from day one while their bosses are still sitting in the Senate waiting to get confirmed. And then to be able to take over on a day-to-day basis. And meanwhile, you've got a organization that's going from 50 people to thousands of people over the course of 10 weeks that's just doing one of the most important things that we have to do as a nation.
Astounding.
So, no pressure on us.
No pressure at all. That really is amazing. Now, I'm somebody who's just terrible with directions. I have to put everything into GPS. Is there someone there to like give you a map or tell you, oh, it's down the hall to the left or something like that? I mean, there's got to be somebody there that has that function.
So it's funny. Yeah, there's a whole team of people at the transition that tell you how to get around and where your office space is and how to log onto your computer. So thank goodness we had a lot of those folks. And even at the White House, some of the people that stay from administration to administration, I worked with one woman who had been there for nearly 40 years.
Wow.
So she had been doing this on and on and on, over and over again. I think she'd probably been telling administrations, this is the last time I'm doing a transition for at least 20 years. But she and a lot of people like that are just absolute rock stars, and you never hear about those folks, and they really make this happen just as much, if not more, than the political folks who come in.
Well, we're in the wake of a somewhat contentious election period, and there are some delays going on. There's some lawsuits. And I'm wondering whether, in your opinion, all of these lawsuits and all of the challenges that are going on are going to delay the transition process, or is the transition process just going to unfold despite all of that?
I don't think that any of that really slows any momentum down. We talked about a little bit that the transition doesn't start the day after the election. It doesn't start the day the GSA says, okay, you're the guy. It's really something that has been going on and will continue to go on for a while. The other thing you got to remember is this isn't the first time there's been a contentious election. Even in the Trump 2016 election, we had contests and recounts and lawsuits that were still ongoing. And sure, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy and things like that, but it doesn't stop what's moving ahead. So the two things can really go on at the same time. And let's not forget, in 2000, they really truly didn't know who the next president was going to be until December 12th. So, that was a lot more disruptive, I think, than what's going on right now. I think you've seen Joe Biden has been announcing his picks. He's been announcing his White House staff. None of that has stopped anybody from being able to do their jobs.
Well, in a lot of ways, we have President George Washington to thank for the peaceful transfer of power, for voluntarily stepping down, not because he had to, not because there was some statutory requirement or anything like that, but because he just did it. And as you say, we've had many contentious elections in the past, and if you just look at the first 4 presidents and how each one took office, I mean, each transition was in itself very complicated. So this is not something that is unusual, although we like to think of our own era as being unprecedented or extraordinary. Yes. We know that there are precedents and that this process has been going on for quite some time. Is there something historically that was expected of the lame duck president, or is there a sort of a tradition or an etiquette or something that is expected of the lame duck president before the president-elect becomes the president or gets sworn in?
Well, that's one of the amazing things about the transition is it really hasn't mattered. It's worked no matter what. There's this infamous, maybe apocryphal story about the W's being stolen off of the keyboard between Clinton and Bush. Who knows if that's really true? There's shenanigans that go on. The Presidential Transition Act was from 1963. So, as you know, there's been a lot of transitions, and between parties and even within parties, there was some friction between the Reagan and Bush White Houses, where I think a lot of the Reagan staff had expected that they were just going to get to stay on for the 3rd term of Reagan in the form of George H.W. Bush. And that wasn't the case. So there was even some bitterness when it was the same party taking over. You had the Nixon transition. I mean, that was not smooth and, of course, not a normal time transition. So I think you've seen a lot of different approaches to transitions. I think everybody kind of celebrates the Bush to Obama transition as one of the most seamless. The story behind that is between the recount and everything else that was going on and maybe some friction between the Clinton and Bush teams. I think the Bush team really wanted to commit to that. They saw what happened in 9/11 and they said, we're going to just have the platonic form of all transition between those. And that was great. Different things have had, different outcomes to some extent. But again, these are the institutions of our country, and even what's going on and what might be the soap opera or the headlines back and forth that might get your attention, it hasn't mattered. And that's the amazing thing, is all this stuff just keeps happening kind of consistently through our history, and it's a really big thing for us to celebrate.
It is, it is. Now you obviously had a life and a successful career before you served in the presidential transition team and before you served in the White House. So, you know, I bet people are interested in, how does one even get to this position? How do you, obviously there's not just, oh, I see on LinkedIn opening in the White House, you know, how does that happen? How do you get to where, you know, you got?
The funny thing is, my first job in politics was off of Monster.com.
Oh, you're
Do
kidding
you remember
me.
that?
I remember,
back
yeah.
before LinkedIn and Indeed and all these other things. So to some extent, you might just find a job listing that gets you into it. But I don't think anybody's path to the White House or to any job in politics is straightforward. Most of us who are in politics are in it with a sense of adventure and a sense of a duty and service, obviously. Very few people, I know everybody likes to watch House of Cards and all these things. Most of the people that are in this business are in it to help people, because they think that their outcomes are really going to help people. So I think it's easy to demonize people on both sides and all that stuff. But most people, you know, get into it in different ways. I was, like I said, Monster.com was my entree into politics. There was a job listing for a campaign manager program in Massachusetts. I had never been to Massachusetts. I don't think I'd ever been north of Pennsylvania in my life. And I said, oh, that sounds fun. It's an 8-month job. I can live in Boston for 8 months as a Southerner. That's fine. That turned into a job for Mitt Romney, who ended up running for president. When he lost, I needed a backup plan. I wasn't looking to move across the country and keep moving from campaign job to campaign job. I was very, very fortunate to get into law school and to hang out for those 3 years and get a degree. Went back to Romney, who decided to run for president again in 2012, and then was in private practice doing campaign and election law for a few years, until we had a client who came up to us, and his name was Donald Trump, and he wanted to run for president. So the eventual White House counsel, Don McGahn, and I worked on his campaign from our law firm at the time. So, you know, that's a very, very quick version of the long and involved story. But, you know, in the end, it takes a lot of luck to end up in the White House. I had worked for 2 presidential campaigns that were not winning before then. So, you know, you end up kind of winning and losing and moving around and having different jobs based on the fortunes of the people you've chosen to work for. So,
and your area of private practice was so unique and so specialized that probably lent itself to really helpful experience when it came to just being prepared for the transition from private work into government work.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about campaigns is you kind of have to do everything. You can't just focus on labor law or transactional law or litigation. You just kind of have to adapt and move quickly. And that is one of the things about the White House. I mean, nothing can prepare you for ending up with a West Wing job in any administration and in any circumstances. But being adaptable, being able to just pick things up, and being able to deal with the pace of how many issues that may be completely different. There was one day I went from a meeting about the White House Easter egg roll, which was very important in many ways to many people. Yeah. And that was in the East Wing. And then I got back to my desk and ended up having a message on my desk that I needed to go end up talking about a national security situation. So I went from the Easter egg roll to a very, very sensitive, difficult topic in the course of, you know, the walk across the White House. So days were like that, and that is one of the biggest things, and I think it was very difficult for a lot of people to adjust to the pace. And I think that's one thing about transition is, you know, you think you've worked really hard and not slept for the entire campaign, and then there's transition where you work even harder and sleep even less. And then if you end up in one of these jobs, you work even harder and sleep even less with a lot more pressure, because once you realize this is affecting people's lives. It's not just who's going to win. It's some people in Alabama or Kansas or wherever are going to be personally affected by what you're doing on a day-to-day basis there, and it's a lot of responsibility.
That is a lot of responsibility. On a lighter note, what is it like? We're sitting here. It's the middle of December. We've got the holiday season right upon us. What is it like to behold just the Christmas decorations? I mean, is it as majestic as it seems on TV? Is it an awesome thing?
It is. I mean, I think I've probably conveyed this pretty well, and I swear I'm kind of a cynical person, but when you get to talking about these things, going to the Christmas parties, seeing the decorations, it's just amazing. And again, it doesn't, the power and aura of the office just is there, no matter who's sitting there. Obviously the Bush administration and the Trump administration were slightly different in a number of ways, but the same feeling of it's the White House, and you've got a duty when you're there, and the trappings and glamour of it. It does get you sometimes, and Christmas is definitely one of those times. I mean, seeing all of that, and then, even watching the tourist walk by, you might be going to a meeting where you have to kind of push your way through a tour or something, and these people are seeing this for the first time, and it's wonderful to be able to see, and it just makes your heart swell with patriotic pride, as silly as that sounds.
I bet. No, it doesn't sound silly at all. Well, I'm glad that people like you serve in positions like that. I'm also glad to have you back to Alabama, selfishly, and I'm really thankful that you came in today and that you took the time to visit with us. Thank you so much for coming on eConversations, Annie. It's been a real pleasure.
It's been great to be back, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Thank you.